I'm John, and if you haven't been to a HackOut yet, you don't know what you're missing out on.
Startup Weekend HackOut is the world's first LGBTQIA Startup Weekend event.
My name is Lindsay Nguyen, and I can tell you from personal experience, you should absolutely come to HackOut. You won't be disappointed.
The hardest part of starting up is starting out, and our mission is to inspire entrepreneurs in the LGBTQIA community to learn the ropes of validating an idea for a startup and turn that idea into a full-blown business venture. In just 54 hours, you'll experience the highs, lows, fun, and pressure that make up life at a startup. As you learn how to create a real company, you'll meet the very best mentors, investors, co-founders, and sponsors who are ready to help you get started.
Hi, my name's Julian, and I'm one of the organizers for HackOut this year. When I signed up to be part of HackOut, I did not expect all of you to be coming to my apartment, but here you are. So let me tell you what you're looking at. But also, I have some motivational posters on my wall to keep me motivated. I've got a whiteboard that I tend to use to organize my day, and some photos around that represent friends and family, and also frisbee, which is a sport I love to play, but I can't do it during COVID. Anyway, welcome to the first pre-event workshop for HackOut. HackOut's a multi-day event coming up next month where you have the opportunity to pitch an idea, form a team, and work with that team to launch a new business in just one weekend. Let me show you some pictures from a previous HackOut event so you can see kind of what we're talking about. Now, HackOut is more than just building a business. It's also about building community. In fact, last year we had over 100 people gather at UT Austin to build their business and also do some community building. It was a great event. Unfortunately, this year, coronavirus has affected everybody's lives. And it's going to keep us from doing this event in person. But it's not going to keep us from building those relationships. Actually, one of the benefits of doing this event online is it's going to enable people from around the world to participate in this event. Actually, let me show you a picture of a map of all the cities that people will apply to be part of HackOut this year. So there's a map. And you can see there's a lot of cities indicated in the U.S., but also cities from other parts of the world. And we're looking forward to meeting all these people during HackOut. Now, community building is a two-way street. And myself and the other organizers are doing our best to create an online event that's going to be great to participate in. But we also want to hear from you. So take a moment, if you can, to drop in the chat a little introduction of yourself, what city you're in, and what you're looking forward to seeing at HackOut this year. Now, and we'll put some of those on camera if we can. Oh, I'm so nervous. Okay. So, one of the other areas that we're innovating with this year is the amount of mentor contact that you're going to have. We always have mentors that plug into those teams during HackOut to help them succeed. This year, we're doing even more of that by allowing people to get in touch with some of those mentors in advance and learn from them some great pieces of what it takes to build a great startup. I'm going to invite Dustin Thomas, who's the lead organizer of HackOut this year, to introduce today's speaker and topic.
Hey, Julian.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going? I see you have all of your cool posters. All I got is the plants that I've been collecting over COVID. So sorry that I don't have anything else that's super cool.
Well, good. Everyone knows that you love plants. I love plants too. I try and keep them alive. Looks like yours are well alive, so good job.
Thanks. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Desmond Thomas. I'm one of the co-leads for HackOut this year. I've been with HackOut for about 4 years now, and I'm super excited to lead us into this new digital world that COVID has provided us with. But first, before we get started on anything else, I want to say a big thank you to Taylor, my other co-lead, who is organizing everything super smoothly in the background. So as you guys are also putting in the chat where you're from and what you're looking to learn, if you could say thank you, Taylor, that would mean a lot to us, seriously. But I'm here to introduce the next person who's going to be speaking, our star for the day. His name is Gordon Daughety. He is a best-selling author, a seasoned business executive, entrepreneur, startup advisor, and investor. He has made more than 200 investments in early-stage companies and has been involved in raising more than $80 million in growth and venture capital. He's going to tell us a little bit today about idea validation. We love people who are super enthusiastic about an idea and taking that first step to creating a company, but unfortunately, we know that not all ideas turn into products or services that can generate revenue. So he's going to tell us a little bit about how to avoid some of those pitfalls and what to look out for. Hey, Gordon, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Good to have you, Desmond. Good to see you again.
You as well. Thanks so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, I'll let you have it. You have the floor.
All right, I got the floor. It's nice to be here with you all talking about this topic of idea validation. Desmond mentioned a little bit about my background. This company called Capital Factory, which sits at the center of gravity for entrepreneurship in Texas, it really affords me the pleasure of spending 100% of my time educating and advising and investing in tech startups. Another outlet for my creative work is Shockwave Innovations. I've got a website by that name, shockwaveinnovations.com. And I've published about 150 articles and produced a video library. And last year, I kind of went a little crazy and couldn't help myself. And I wrote a book. The book's called Startup Success. And the first volume is actually a fundraising book. The subtitle is Funding the Early Stages of Your Venture. Had a lot of fun writing that. And for those of you that decide to go down the fundraising path and decide to buy the book, I hope it brings you a lot of value. So for the topic for today, validating your idea, it's so fundamentally important that I almost can't stress that enough, because if the idea that you're working on isn't something that's going to lead to at least a viable company, then the earlier you can face that, then the less pain and suffering will be involved. And the more time that there would be to pivot into an idea that could build a really viable and exciting business. So that's the topic of today. My hope, I'd like to say promise, but I won't know that until we're done and you let me know. But my hope is that I deliver at least 2 aha moments for each of you just on the topic of idea validation. And an aha moment isn't just something that you write down or something that you type into your notes. It's something that you write down and put an asterisk and then circle it or highlight it in yellow, like, oh, it's an aha kind of moment. And I'm hoping I can deliver at least a couple of those for you during this topic. Now, I mentioned that idea validation and idea development is really, really fundamental. And that's because I find that founders can fall into this trap very quickly of just feeling like if we build it, they'll come. You know, in your mind, this problem that you're going to solve is a terrible problem that needs to be solved desperately. And the solution you have is surely the best solution ever. But you know, rather than just immediately start going to work on it, there's some things that you can do to validate your various assumptions. Now, I love quotations. Any of you that find yourself on my website, you'll see I have a whole blog category for favorite quotes. And so I sprinkled a couple of them in here that I thought were appropriate for this topic of idea validation. This one's from Ben Franklin. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. See, this topic of idea validation is part of the early planning process. Before you put your hands on the keyboard or soldering iron, there is some planning that you can and should do. This is another quote that's attributed to a lot of people, actually. But luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So the opportunity is going to come later as you have a product and get paying customers, or the opportunity might come many years later when some potential acquirer offers you $1 billion to buy your company. But the luck is going to come from the preparation that you do now in the very early days. So that's why I like this quote. So what is idea development and idea validation? It's essentially trying to assess the viability of your business idea and your future company up front. Okay, so it's this front-end loaded viability assessment. And when I talk about viability, I have to reveal to you the new business viability life cycle. This is my version of it. You'll see others that are very, very similar, if not identical. But this is the phase of evolution that most startups go through. And just to briefly discuss why they go in this sequence, desirability is testing whether or not people want it. Are you really solving a problem or a pain point that needs to be solved? Feasible is the phase when you demonstrate that you can build it. Can you build the intended product to solve that problem? A viable company is one in which the lifetime value of a customer or a user is significantly greater than the cost to acquire that customer. Not just barely more than the customer acquisition cost, because you have to pay for all the rest of the company with the money that you make, not just your customer acquisition function. But that would be a viable company. And if you can get to a viable company, then you can set your sights on building a scalable and sustainable company. Realize sometimes a viable business becomes sustainable, but not scalable. In other words, it becomes something that could generate millions of dollars of revenue, but not hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. And that's just fine. I mean, a company doesn't have to be huge in order to be considered successful. And I know in the mindset that we are as tech entrepreneurs and tech founders, there's the Zuckerberg syndrome or the Facebook syndrome that everybody wants to be a unicorn, but I applaud founders that are able to solve a problem, have happy customers, have happy, enriched employees. And if that means it's a $5 or $10 million company and everybody's having fun, hey, that can be a definition of success. So I say only you get to decide what's important and if that would be a measure of success. The idea development tools are mostly used, what I'm going to talk about today, to try and assess desirability and at least try and get some hints of viability, not as much feasibility, okay? So one way I like to go about this is to start with a list of assumptions. One of the articles that I wrote and published on my site is titled, "Your First Business Plan is a Huge List of Assumptions." So when you and a prospective co-founder are sitting in the coffee shop riffing on your idea, what's really happening is you're making a bunch of assumptions. But those assumptions are really, really important. And I like to write them down. And that's your first business plan. And so the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is, as you come up with your idea for this hackathon, and some of you, the hackathon idea is something that you actually want to pursue, what is it that you're assuming? And there are a lot of statements that you can put onto that list. And I like to start them off as "we believe that" or "I believe that." And if you'll just start, "I believe that," and just write that a whole bunch of times, how many different instances of completing that sentence can you complete? And that's what I mean by a list of assumptions as your starting business plan. Now, as you have that list of questions, those list of assumptions, the reason that's so valuable is that is what you're going to use when you go out to the market to prospective customers or prospective users to try and validate your idea. And you're going to try and ask questions that will either validate or invalidate those assumptions. And I'm going to recommend that you do that using what are called open-ended questions. Anybody that goes through sales training learns what open-ended questions are, but it's pretty simple. They're questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. The other reason that open-ended questions are good is it's a little bit harder to impose bias into the question. So the first example you see here on this slide is not an open-ended question. Do you agree that most people suffer this problem, or do you agree that it's a problem and whatever? You're leading the witness, if you will. Instead, ask them an open-ended question. How do you do this? Tell me about a time when. Those are really good open-ended type questions that'll help you get underneath the pain point that you're trying to solve or the opportunity that you're opening up for your customer or user of your solution. So think about that when you start to craft your script for your idea validation interviews. There's so much you can figure out when you do this, when you go out into the market and you start asking these questions and doing these, we call them customer discovery interviews. But are you targeting the right customer in the first place? Sometimes we think it's going to be, women in the 25 to 39 age bracket, and we find out that actually that's not the case. So you might refine the demographic or the persona that you're targeting. Does your target audience see the problem the same way you do? Are there other problems that they experience that are related to the problem you're solving? Those can be really interesting. They can be interesting because those can become expansion areas or those can become pivots. If for whatever reason you find out that you can't build a viable company for the actual problem you're solving, if your target customer or target user experiences other problems in the same general area, you might have a pretty easy pivot in that direction. As they suffer this problem, how do they get around it? What are their alternatives? What other solutions have they entertained in the past? And essentially, you're trying to figure out at the end of the day, if you build something that will solve that problem, are they likely to use it and or pay for it? That's what we're talking about. So I'm going to give you an example. One of my favorite hypothetical case studies, Doggie Drone. So welcome to Doggie Drone. It enables dog ownership for disabled senior citizens. Meet Luella. Luella's 75 years old. She lives at home alone, and she's lonely and sometimes depressed, but for the most part, she's generally healthy. Now, her doctor told her that if she owned a dog, there's a lot of benefits for the elderly, especially the elderly that want to continue living at home as opposed to going into assisted living. It can lower their stress and anxiety. Having a dog can lower rates of depression and can control things like blood pressure. So Luella went out and got a dog. Her dog is Sunny. But what's going to happen when Luella's no longer able to walk Sunny? She's getting older, and there's going to be certain conditions that she can no longer walk Sunny. Does that mean she's going to have to give Sunny up? Does that mean she's not going to be able to get another dog after Sunny? So I want to introduce the Doggie Drone. The Doggie Drone is a drone that walks the dog for you. It's going to walk Luella's dog Sunny for her. She gets to select the desired distance and route, gets to see real-time video as Sunny's being walked, and she gets an alert when Sunny's about 2 minutes away from getting back home so she can greet him at the front door. All right, so let me just pause there. I won't go through the whole pitch deck on Doggie Drone, but the reason I wanted to give you that part of it is if that is the idea, if my idea is to solve the problem of dog ownership for the elderly that are at least somewhat disabled, enough disabled that they can't walk their dog, right? That's my idea. I want to share with you some of the things I think I could validate for Doggie Drone before ever putting my hands on the keyboard or soldering iron. If I'll get out there and I'll talk to some senior citizens, do disabled senior citizens actually want to own a dog? If they could take care of it? Like, I'm assuming that if they could take care of a dog, that they would want to have a dog. Is that true? In addition to having some sort of a solution for walking their dog, are there other issues that need to be solved before they can own a dog? This is an interesting one because I might go build Doggie Drone and put it out in the market and then later find out that it's not just walking the dog. What about feeding the dog? What about trips to the vet? There's other things that go along with owning a dog beyond just walking the dog. So if my audience is disabled seniors, I need to solve the problem, enough of the problem for them to be motivated to go get a dog. Otherwise, they're not going to buy my drone because they don't have a solution for feeding the dog and making trips to the vets. See, but if I'm going to interview disabled seniors ahead of time, this might be something that I could find out. What alternatives have disabled seniors considered or tried in the past for having their dog walked? Did they try and hire the neighbor kids? You know, were the neighbor kids reliable? Were they only available before they went to school and after they got home? And what do I do for walking the dog during school? Did they hire a dog walking service? Was it too expensive? So I need to dig in underneath that to make sure Doggie Drone is a viable idea. Are disabled seniors willing to have a drone walk their dog? That seems kind of futuristic. Is there a generational issue? Of course, there likely could be. But if they're willing to, are there any concerns that they would have? You know, safety concerns or otherwise. And last one, just to kind of pick a demographic, since we're talking about the elderly, are women or men, elderly women or elderly men, more likely to consider using a dog walking drone? So this is just a small list, but you can imagine if I was building a company called Doggie Drone and I made that list of assumptions, that huge list of assumptions for my starting business plan, I would have made some assumptions that are along the lines of what I could validate here during my idea validation stage as I go out and talk to disabled seniors and ask them those open-ended questions. And last one, I guess here, is it okay if the dog needs to be 25 pounds or less? Yeah, you don't know anything about Doggie Drone, but if you attended my boot camp or others, you'd learn that the first version of Doggie Drone can only handle dogs up to 25 pounds. Is that a showstopper or not? If it's a showstopper, then I need to go to work on Doggie Drone version 2 that can handle dogs up to 50 pounds or 75 pounds. All right, I hope that's helpful as an example. Now, the next thing I'm going to encourage you to do is to, as much as possible, witness your prospective users and customers in their natural environment. In other words, as they're experiencing the problem or as they're trying to exercise the opportunity that you unlock. Now, 6 months ago, that would have been a lot easier than it is now, because it usually means getting off the phone and getting out in the same environment in which the problem is experienced. So during the pandemic, you're going to have to get creative. Are there ways to get into video conferences? Because I think you want to ask them to show you how it happens. As you do this versus, like, let's say, versus just a phone call or versus a survey, sending someone a survey, are they going to be really open and honest with you? You're not going to be able to discover those other tangential insights versus if you're really having a discussion with them. And actually being in a video conference or with them in person, you're going to see the expression on your face, and you'll be able to better tell when you've really struck a nerve, when you've really hit the pain point. And then I love this one, and this is the one where, during the pandemic, it's going to be harder than it otherwise would, but I love asking this question. Hey, would you mind showing me how you, and then fill in the blank for whatever it is that relates to the problem you're going to solve for them. So, hey, would you mind showing me, just could you pull that up and could you show me one? Could you do one? It's a really, really good question for idea validation. Now, when you're done with this interview, don't just thank them for their time and hang up the phone or hang up the video conference, or, if you're in there in person, don't just do the elbow bump and walk away. At the end of that interview, you have a couple of opportunities. You should recap what you heard, look through your notes, and kind of recite back what you think the important insights were. You're essentially asking this customer or user to confirm that you understood them correctly. And this is because you're going to go into that interview with a bias. You've already pretty much convinced yourself that you're solving a problem that needs to be solved. And so you will tend to hear things in ways that may or may not be exactly true. And so by doing this recap, you're going to show this prospective customer that you've been paying attention. You're going to give them opportunity to correct you, like, no, that's not quite what I said. Or they're going to say, that's not what I meant. And that'll help correct for some of your biases. And then, of course, you have an opportunity, if you're with them, to see if they'd like to be a beta tester once you do actually have a prototype built of this. And so a lot of this idea validation, I mentioned it's trying to find out, are you pointed towards a viable business? Like, should you actually pursue this venture? But the other thing that hopefully you can find out if you do it right is whether or not you're building something that people desperately need versus just something that they want. This is, if you've ever read the aspirin versus vitamin analogy, aspirin will cure pain, at least temporarily. Vitamin might make you more healthy, but if I sell an aspirin for $1 and a vitamin for $1, if you're experiencing any pain, you're going to buy the aspirin 100% of the time, because that is a need, whereas a vitamin is a want. And so this is what you're going to also hopefully be able to get some insights into. People will always solve needs before wants. And if you're selling to businesses and it comes down to business budgets, it always comes down to need versus want. The wants always get pushed down lower in priority. And so you want to be listening for this. Is it a need or a want? And a desperately need is better than a just, I kind of need. Hope that makes sense. So those are the concepts that I have for idea validation. If you'll allow me to be so bold as to give you a homework assignment kind of leading up to your hackathon, write out that list of assumptions that you're making for your business plan. Now, I realize there's only so much you're able to do in preparation for something like a hackathon, but I'll also say, if you only end up with 5 or 6 items in your in your assumptions list, I don't think you're trying hard enough. If I found out later that you had 20 or 30 items on your assumption list, yeah, now you're getting there. That's better. And if someone says that they've got 50 or 60 items in their list, I'm going to say, yeah, you know what? I come across entrepreneurs that take this really seriously, and they do end up with 40 or 50 or 60 items on their assumption list. So give a crack at that. And then secondly, of course, leading up to the hackathon, to the extent you think it would be valuable, and hopefully you can tell I do think it would be valuable, do some of those customer discovery or user discovery interviews. All of this will make your hackathon pitch, or whatever the final product of your hackathon result is, it will make it much more rich. And to the extent there are judges or panelists that are going to ask you questions or information that you need to submit for a business plan, whatever it is, it will be just so much more rounded out. I have an article that I wrote that says, are you building don't just build a product, build a company, something along those lines. And that's because the product is a very important part of the overall business plan. But for any of you that have worked in businesses that have gotten to 5 million or 10 million or 100 million, my gosh, there is so much more to a company than just the product. So part of the insights that I've hopefully provided for you for validating your idea expands the aperture of a business plan, so that whatever the end result or the call to action for your hackathon itself, you will be better prepared for those questions and to show that your idea could lead to a company, not just a product. So I hope that's helpful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can say hello, and I hope that was valuable.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Gordon. I really appreciate that. And all the words that you just said. We did get a couple of questions in the chat. I know that we just talked about not doing Q&A in our practice session, but I did at least want to call out one to get your final thoughts on that before you leave. Kyle Outlaw says, how much of this is for tech startups versus the service industry? Or we could extrapolate that and say any other industry, right?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I have a boot camp that I run called Founders Academy, the Founders Academy Essentials Boot Camp. I run it once a quarter. It's free. It's all online. And when we did it in person, I would always have participants come up and ask me questions, and I could tell by their questions that they weren't a tech company. They were a services company. And I'd ask them, as soon as I'd realized that, I was like, oh, you're not a tech company. Why are you here? And they said, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, did you get anything out of the boot camp today? They're like, of course, like 85% of what you're talking about, it applies to any company. So I do absolutely believe that the same basic principles. So just when I said hands-on keyboard or soldering iron, just ignore that, right? Mm-hmm. Substitute before you go lease the office space, right? And before you go hire your first employee. So if you want to build a new landscaping business, or you've got a consultancy or whatever, you still have a lot of assumptions. Does there need to be another landscaping company in Northwest Austin, Texas, or are there plenty of them? I'm planning on doing a different type of landscaping company. It does this. Do people care? So yeah, all of the principles should apply pretty much for any type of company. You're making assumptions. You should go validate those assumptions before you go hire employees, before you lease an office, and before you go spend money on an attorney to incorporate the company.
Awesome. Of course, that totally makes sense. Thanks for answering that. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for being here. And is there anything else that you'd like to plug before we let you go?
Good question. So most of what I think I have to talk about is on my website, that's shockwaveinnovations.com. I do run a boot camp for those of you that are working on tech ventures. The next one is going to come up in, I think, the second or third week of October. The Eventbrite registration is just foundersacademy.eventbrite.com, foundersacademy.eventbrite.com. It's 3 days. It's a lunch and learn. It's an hour and a half each day over the lunch hour, Monday through Wednesday. Love to have you. I think the last one we had 500 and some odd participants from 18 countries around the world. I love doing it. I cover about a dozen or so lectures in those 3 days, and I'd love to have you all there.
Cool. Well, we'll at least post your website in the chat so that people can see that.
Awesome.
Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Bye. I guess we're going to bring Julian back, maybe?
Hello. Yes.
Hey.
That was great. And I want to throw out there too, during startup weekend, during HackOut, we are definitely going to be judging the teams on part of their score is going to be based on how much idea validation that they did. So make sure that you understand the concept that Gordon just talked about, and a recording of this session, if you want to review it, is going to be available via HackOut.StartOut.org, the website. So please go there and check it out once we get that posted to let you know. And this is, of course, one of the sessions we have in advance of the HackOut next month. Every Monday, we're going to be doing these. Next Monday, we have Janice Omodeke coming on. She's the CEO of the Mentor Method to talk about maximizing mentorship, both during HackOut and in your life generally. So make sure you tune into that. And if you haven't invited your friends to be part of HackOut this year, coming up next month, be sure to invite your friends, and all the information is available via HackOut.StartOut.org. So we're super happy you came and joined us today. Dustin, did you have a good time?
Yeah, pretty good. I liked it.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you all next Monday and next month during HackOut.
Bye.